Selina, young and beautiful, was struck with a wound that was tied forever to the day she was supposed to marry the love of her life, her happy ever after, her peace and joy. Before we go on, I would like to kindly ask that you please subscribe to the channel, like the video and drop a nice comment. It would mean a lot to me. The morning had begun like a dream. The sun rose in perfect brilliance, flooding her bedroom with a golden glow. The streets below buzzed with quiet excitement, as neighbors whispered about the grand wedding that would take place later that day. Everyone in town knew Selina and Darian were the perfect couple. Their story was the kind of romance people pointed to and said, "That's what I want." Inside the bridal suite at the hotel, there was laughter. Her bridesmaids fluttered around her like colorful butterflies, adjusting veils, straightening flowers, snapping quick photos on their phones. A playlist of soft R&B played in the background, blending with the clinking of champagne glasses. But even in that warmth, Selina felt it, the tiniest ripple of unease. She couldn't explain it, not then. She only noticed how her best friend Fiona was different. Fiona had been her anchor since childhood. They'd grown up together, whispering secrets under blankets, crying over first heartbreaks, celebrating exam results. Selina had been there when Fiona's father walked out. Fiona had been there when Selina's mother fell sick. They weren't just friends, they were sisters, bound not by blood but by something deeper. Yet that morning, Fiona's presence felt sharp. Her laughter was too high-pitched, almost forced. When the others helped Selina into her dress, Fiona stood slightly apart, sipping her drink, her eyes glimmering with something Selina couldn't place. Still, Selina brushed it off. Today wasn't a day for suspicion. Today was about joy. About walking down the aisle to Darian, the man who had fought for her love with everything in him. Darian. Just the thought of him steadied her. He wasn't like the other men she'd known, the ones who thought love was a game, who made promises they never intended to keep. No, Darian was steady, ambitious, and kind. When they met at a charity gala 3 years earlier, he had barely glanced at anyone else. His eyes had locked onto hers across the room, and Selina had felt it instantly, that pull, that spark. He had walked straight up to her, ignoring everyone else in his path, and said, "I think I just found the woman I'm going to marry." At the time, she laughed it off. But he proved her wrong. Darian chased her heart with a persistence that melted her defenses. He learned her quirks, remembered her favorite books, stayed up all night with her when her mother was ill. He loved her not just in words, but in actions. And she had fallen hard. So why, on the morning of the happiest day of her life, did her stomach twist with unease when Fiona adjusted her veil and whispered, "You look beautiful, Selina. Darian won't be able to take his eyes off you?" Why did it sound less like a blessing and more like a warning? The hours passed in a blur. Soon Selina was standing behind the closed doors of the chapel, her arm hooked through her father's. She could hear the music swell inside, the murmur of guests as they rose to their feet. Her heart raced, her lips curved into a nervous smile. This was it. The moment she had waited for all her life. The doors opened. Gasps of admiration swept through the hall as Selina stepped forward in her ivory gown. Her veil caught the light, shimmering softly, as if heaven itself had touched her. She kept her eyes fixed on the altar, where Darian stood waiting in his tailored suit. But then, she noticed something. Darian wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at her with the awe she had imagined, the joy she had pictured in her dreams. Instead, his eyes darted sideways, quick and nervous. Following his gaze, Selina's breath caught in her throat. Because standing just a few feet away, in the front row, was Fiona. And Darian was looking at her. Not in a casual way. Not in the way a groom might glance at a bridesmaid or guest. No, this was different. His gaze lingered too long. Too heavy. Too familiar. Selina tried to steady herself, to believe she was imagining things. She took another step, clutching her bouquet tighter. But then it happened again. Darian's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tensed, and his eyes flicked toward Fiona like a magnet he couldn't resist. And Fiona. Fiona was staring back. Her best friend. Her sister. There was something in Fiona's expression, a secret smile, quickly masked, but not quickly enough. It was the look of a woman who knew something no one else did. In that moment, Selina's world shifted. The music swelled louder, but in her ears, it was muted. The faces of her guests blurred. Even her father's grip on her arm felt distant. All she could see was that silent exchange between her groom and her best friend. And deep inside her chest, a cold, jagged realization began to form. Something was very, very wrong. She didn't know it then, but within the next hour, her life would unravel before her eyes. Her dream wedding would become the stage for the most brutal humiliation she could ever imagine. And the two people she trusted most, her groom and her best friend, would be the ones holding the knife. Selina had always believed that true friendship was unbreakable. That no matter what life threw at two people who genuinely cared for each other, the bond would hold. For years, Fiona had been the proof of that belief. They first met in middle school. Selina was the quiet one, reserved, happiest with her nose in a book. Fiona was her opposite, bold, sharp-tongued, and magnetic, the kind of girl who could walk into a room and immediately own it. Somehow, their differences pulled them together. Fiona liked that Selina was steady, thoughtful, someone she could trust with her secrets. And Selina admired Fiona's fearless spirit, her ability to speak up in ways Selina never could. Their friendship only deepened as they grew older. Through every breakup, every exam, every hardship, they were each other's refuge. When Fiona's father abandoned their family, it was Selina who slipped under her blanket at night, whispering promises that she would never leave. And when Selina's mother was hospitalized years later, Fiona practically lived at the hospital, bringing food and cracking jokes to keep Selina from falling apart. But there was always a shadow. It began as subtle moments, the kind you don't notice until years later. Fiona, with her dazzling charm, was used to being the center of attention. And sometimes when Selina's quiet beauty caught someone's eye first, Fiona's smile would tighten, just for a heartbeat, before she laughed it off. There were times when Fiona would casually flirt with boys Selina liked, only to brush it off later as harmless fun. Selina never thought much of it. She trusted Fiona too deeply to believe there could be malice in her actions. But in hindsight, the signs had always been there, tiny cracks in the foundation of their friendship. The cracks widened the day Darian entered the picture. Selina had been dragged to a charity gala she had no interest in attending. She remembered standing awkwardly by the dessert table, sipping a glass of water, when Darian walked in. Tall, confident, with a disarming smile that seemed to light up the room. His gaze swept past the glittering crowd and landed on her. He walked straight over, not hesitating, not looking anywhere else, and said with complete certainty, "I think I just found the woman I'm going to marry." Selina had laughed nervously, certain he was joking. But Darian wasn't a man who joked about things like that. He pursued her with quiet determination, sending flowers, showing up at her office with lunch, learning her favorite coffee order. When Selina hesitated, he didn't push. He waited. He proved himself through patience, kindness, and persistence. And eventually, she said yes. Fiona had been there through it all. At first, she teased Selina about Darian, calling him Mr. Too Good to Be True. She claimed she was only looking out for her friend, but sometimes her jokes carried an edge that Selina couldn't quite place. Still, Selina ignored it. Fiona was her best friend. Of course she'd come around. When Darian proposed, Fiona was the first person Selina called. Fiona squealed over the phone, demanding to see the ring immediately. She hugged Selina so tightly she nearly knocked her over. But later that night, when Selina replayed the moment in her head, she remembered how Fiona's eyes lingered on the diamond a little too long, how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a small thing. A flicker of doubt that Selina quickly brushed aside. After all, Fiona was helping her plan the wedding. She had thrown herself into the role of maid of honor, organizing dress fittings, food tastings, even scolding vendors when they made mistakes. She was more involved than anyone else, sometimes more than Selina herself. If there was jealousy, Selina told herself, it was only natural. They'd shared everything for so many years. Of course it might sting for Fiona to suddenly watch Selina step into a new life. Still, the unease grew. There were moments, fleeting but real, when Selina caught Fiona looking at Darian a little too intently. Once, during a dinner party, Fiona had laughed at something Darian said and laid her hand on his arm. It was casual enough that no one else noticed. But Selina did. Darian, to his credit, had gently pulled his arm away. He hadn't even seemed to register the gesture. But Selina did. She remembered it. As the wedding approached, the tension only deepened. Fiona threw herself into helping with last-minute details, but her mood swung unpredictably. Some days she was overly cheerful, showering Selina with compliments. Other days, she was distant, distracted, scrolling endlessly on her phone while Selina tried on veils or practiced her vows. Selina wanted to ask, to demand the truth behind Fiona's strange behavior. But what would she say? Are you jealous of me? Do you want Darian for yourself? It sounded absurd even in her own head. So she stayed quiet. And that silence would cost her everything. The night before the wedding, Fiona slept over at Selina's apartment, just as they had promised they would since they were little girls. They lay on the bed, talking about old memories, giggling about childhood crushes. Fiona seemed normal again, her old self. For the first time in weeks, Selina relaxed. But in the middle of the night, she woke to find Fiona sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. The moonlight touched her face, and for a split second, Selina saw something raw and unsettling in her friend's expression. Longing. Regret. Anger. She couldn't tell. Fiona. Selina's voice was groggy. What are you doing? Fiona turned quickly, forcing a smile. Nothing. Just thinking. Go back to sleep. And Selina did. If she had pressed, if she had demanded the truth in that moment, maybe the next day would have been different. Maybe she could have stopped what was coming. But she didn't. And so the next morning, she walked down the aisle believing she was about to marry the love of her life, while Fiona sat in the front row with secrets in her eyes. Secrets that were about to explode in the most humiliating way possible. The chapel was hushed, yet every heartbeat inside it seemed to echo against the walls. Selina's father guided her carefully down the aisle, his hand firm but trembling with emotion. The violinists played softly, the petals on the floor rustled beneath her steps, and every pair of eyes turned toward her, glowing with admiration, envy, awe. But Selina barely noticed. Her gaze was fixed on Darian. And Darian was not looking at her. For the third time since she entered, she caught him glancing at Fiona. Quick, sharp looks that seemed almost involuntary, as though an invisible thread kept tugging his eyes toward her. Each glance was like a dagger to Selina's chest, though she fought to steady her steps, to remind herself that love doesn't unravel in a second. Yet a voice whispered inside her, something is wrong. She reached the altar, her father kissed her cheek, and she placed her trembling hands into Darian's. His palms were clammy, his grip unsteady. Selina forced a smile, but in that moment, doubt clouded the joy that should have been written across her face. The officiant began, his words solemn and rhythmic. Selina tried to focus, to drown out the whispers from the crowd, the nervous shifting of Darian's weight. She told herself it was nerves, every groom felt nervous on his wedding day. But deep inside, she knew better. Do you, Darian, take Selina to be your lawfully wedded wife? The words hung in the air, and the silence that followed was deafening. Darian's lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes darted to the crowd, landing on Fiona, who sat poised in her seat, her face unreadable. The pause stretched too long. Guests began to murmur. The officiant cleared his throat, prompting him gently. Darian swallowed. His voice cracked. He glanced again at Fiona. His chest rose and fell rapidly, as if he couldn't breathe. I can't. Gasps tore through the chapel. The violins faltered into silence. Selina froze, staring at him, her world crashing in slow motion. What do you mean you can't? The officiant asked softly, trying to keep control. But Darian shook his head violently, his hand slipping from Selina's. I can't do this. I can't marry her. The words slammed into Selina like a truck. Her vision blurred, her ears rang. She staggered back, her bouquet tumbling from her hands. And then, before anyone could speak, Fiona stood. Every head turned toward her. She rose with a calmness that didn't belong to the chaos in the room. And then, to everyone's horror, she walked forward. Step by step, past the rows of stunned guests, until she stood beside Darian at the altar. Selina's heart stopped. Fiona didn't look at her. She didn't even pretend to. She turned to Darian, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry across the chapel. Then marry me. A silence fell so heavy it could have crushed the room. Selina's knees buckled. Her father rushed to her side, but she barely felt his arms. All she could see was the image before her, her groom, her best friend, standing together beneath the arch of roses where she was supposed to say her vows. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, outrage. Some people shouted. Someone cried out, "This is madness." Selina couldn't move. Her chest heaved as she searched Darian's face, begging for him to deny it, to push Fiona away, to look at her and say it was all a mistake. But Darian didn't. Instead, his silence was answer enough. He looked at Fiona the way Selina had once dreamed he would look at her on this day, with a hunger, a desperation, a rawness that confirmed everything. Selina's father grabbed her hand, pulling her back from the altar. "We're leaving," he muttered fiercely. "You don't deserve this humiliation." But Selina couldn't move. Her voice finally cracked through the storm inside her, thin and broken. "Why?" The word hung in the air. She looked at Darian, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why would you do this to me? To us?" Darian finally turned to her. His lips parted, but no apology came. Only shame. Only cowardice. And then Fiona spoke, her tone sharp, defensive, almost triumphant. "Because he doesn't love you, Selina. He never did. He loves me." The words sliced deeper than any blade. Gasps echoed again through the hall. Some guests rose angrily, others covered their mouths in shock. But Selina barely registered them. Her entire world had collapsed into a single moment, her best friend's betrayal, her groom's silence, her shattered heart. The officiant tried to restore order, but it was useless. The ceremony dissolved into chaos. Guests stormed out, whispers filling the air like smoke. Some stayed behind, eager to witness the scandal unfold. Selina turned, her veil trembling with the force of her sobs. Her father and bridesmaids surrounded her, shielding her from the gawking eyes. But before they could lead her away, Fiona stepped closer. "You should have seen it, Selina," Fiona said, her voice low but seething with years of jealousy. "The way he looked at me when you weren't watching. You thought you had everything. The perfect man, the perfect life. But it was never yours. It was mine." Selina's hand shot up before she realized it, striking Fiona across the face. The sound cracked through the air like lightning. Fiona staggered back, her cheek flaming red, but she didn't retreat. She smiled, a cruel, satisfied smile. And in that moment, Selina understood. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't accidental. Fiona had been waiting for this. Planning it. And she had won. The chapel, once a sanctuary of love and faith, had turned into a courtroom of whispers. The guests no longer sat in reverent silence. They gossiped in loud hisses, their eyes darting between Selina, Fiona, and Darian. Selina felt trapped in the center of a nightmare. Her ivory gown, once a symbol of purity and joy, now clung to her body like a cruel joke. She wanted to tear it off, to run, to disappear. But her feet felt cemented to the marble floor. Her father's voice was the only anchor cutting through the storm. "Selina, let's go. Now." His tone was firm, protective, the voice of a man who would burn the world before letting anyone harm his daughter again. But as Selina turned to leave, Darian finally spoke. "Selina, wait." The words froze her mid-step. Slowly, she looked back at him. For a fleeting second, hope sparked in her chest. Perhaps he would come to his senses. Perhaps he would shove Fiona away and beg her forgiveness. But Darian's next words crushed that flicker of hope. "I'm sorry, but Fiona's right. My heart isn't with you." A collective gasp filled the room. Some guests groaned in disbelief, others shook their heads in disgust. Selina's knees buckled, her father catching her before she collapsed entirely. Her chest felt hollow, as though her heart had been ripped clean out. "You coward," her father spat at Darian. "To stand here, in front of all these people, and humiliate my daughter like this? You are no man." Darian lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his features, but he didn't move. Fiona stood proudly beside him, chin lifted as though she had just claimed a throne. "Selina deserves the truth," Fiona said smoothly, her voice carrying over the restless crowd. "Better she learns it now than waste years in a loveless marriage." Selina's vision blurred with tears. She shook her head, choking out the words. "A loveless marriage? Fiona, you knew everything, every secret, every dream I had with him. And still you," her voice broke. "You call this love?" Fiona's eyes softened briefly, almost pitying. But then her lips curled into a smirk. "No, Selina. I call this destiny." The words struck harder than any slap. Selina's bridesmaids rushed to her side, shielding her from the eyes that feasted on her pain. Some guests tried to comfort her, others avoided her altogether, as though betrayal were contagious. The once glorious wedding dissolved into chaos, the violinists packing away their instruments in awkward silence, the photographer lowering his camera, the florist whispering prayers under her breath. Outside the chapel, the scandal spread like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone in town would know, Selina had been abandoned at the altar. By her own groom. For her best friend. The hours after were a blur. Selina's father whisked her home, refusing to let her spend another second in that cursed chapel. Her mother sobbed openly, holding Selina as though she could physically shield her from the shame. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, neighbors, relatives, even journalists eager for a scoop. Selina shut herself in her room, burying her face in pillows, wishing the world would swallow her whole. She replayed every memory, every smile, every promise Darian had made. How many of them had been lies? When had Fiona crept into the picture? Had Darian loved her all along, even while courting Selina? The betrayal felt bottomless. It wasn't just losing a man. It was losing two pillars of her life at once, the man she was supposed to marry, and the woman she thought would stand by her forever. Days passed, but the world didn't stop. News outlets reported the scandal with cruel headlines: bride abandoned at the altar, groom runs away with maid of honor. Social media buzzed with gossip, strangers dissecting her humiliation as though it were entertainment. Even walking to the store became unbearable, every glance felt like pity, every whisper like laughter. And yet, Fiona and Darian flourished. They didn't hide. Within a week, they were seen together in public, walking hand in hand, unashamed. Within 2 weeks, Fiona moved into Darian's apartment. Photos surfaced of them dining at expensive restaurants, smiling as though nothing had happened. The audacity stung worse than the betrayal itself. They hadn't just stolen Selina's happiness, they flaunted it. Her bridesmaids tried to rally around her. One, a fiery woman named Althea, cursed Fiona's name so loudly the neighbors complained. "She'll get what's coming to her," Althea promised, gripping Selina's hand. But Selina could only nod numbly. At night, she lay awake, the shadows on her ceiling whispering cruel questions. What did Fiona have that she didn't? Was Selina too plain, too naive, too easy to discard? Did Darian ever really love her at all? But the cruelest question of all was the one that wouldn't leave her mind. Why had Fiona done it? Weeks later, Selina got her answer. It came in the form of a letter, slipped under her door in Fiona's familiar handwriting. The paper trembled in Selina's hands as she unfolded it. "Selina," it began. "You'll hate me forever, and I don't blame you. But you need to understand, Darian was never yours. From the moment I met him, I knew he was mine. You might have been his choice, but I was his destiny. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe it was fate. All I know is that I couldn't watch you live the life I wanted, not when I had the chance to take it. I don't expect forgiveness. But I won't apologize for following my heart. Fiona." The words blurred as tears filled Selina's eyes. For years, Fiona had hidden it, envy, hunger, a bitterness Selina never noticed. She had trusted her with everything, blind to the storm brewing behind her friend's smile. Now it was too late. The damage was done. But betrayal, Selina would soon learn, was never the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because while Fiona believed she had won, fate was far from finished with her. And Selina's brokenness would one day become her strength. The letter burned in Selina's hand long after she finished reading it. She could have torn it apart, screamed, or hurled it into the fire. Instead, she folded it neatly and tucked it away in her drawer. Not as a keepsake, but as evidence, a reminder of the depths to which human hearts could sink. For weeks, she avoided the world. She rarely left her room, except to sit by the garden her mother tended outside, watching butterflies land on roses as though beauty could still exist in the midst of ruin. But slowly, she began to pick herself up. She returned to her small job at the bookstore, started walking to the cafe she once loved, and began writing in a journal. At first, her words were soaked in pain. But gradually, they began to shift, not toward forgiveness, but toward clarity. She realized something. Fiona and Darian had taken her wedding day, but they had not taken her life. Meanwhile, the fairy tale Fiona had stolen began to fray at the edges. At first, she and Darian seemed inseparable. They laughed too loudly in restaurants, posed for pictures on street corners, posted smiling photos online with captions about finally living freely. But behind closed doors, cracks spread quickly. Darian wasn't the romantic she had painted in her imagination. He was restless, easily irritated, and prone to mood swings. Fiona noticed how he avoided her questions, how his eyes sometimes glazed with regret when he thought she wasn't watching. "You still think of her, don't you?" Fiona hissed one night as they argued in his apartment. Darian rubbed his temples. "Don't start, Fiona. I'm here with you, aren't I?" "But your heart isn't," she snapped. "It never was fully mine." The very thing she had stolen was slipping through her fingers. Worse, the world was not kind to her either. People whispered when she walked past. Old friends cut her off, unwilling to associate with the woman who had betrayed her best friend. Even her own parents, ashamed, distanced themselves. "We didn't raise you for this," her mother said coldly. Fiona had won the man, but lost the world. Selina, on the other hand, was slowly gaining hers back. An old family friend, Mr. Rowan, who ran a local publishing house, happened upon her journals one day when she left them open on the bookstore counter. He read a few lines and was struck by the raw honesty. "You write like someone who has lived through fire," he said. "People need to hear this." At first, Selina laughed off the idea. But months later, with his encouragement, she turned her journals into a collection of essays and short reflections titled Ashes of a Dream. It wasn't meant to be grand, just a small project. But when it was published, it spread like wildfire. Readers connected deeply with her voice, a woman broken, betrayed, but unbowed. Her story wasn't about victimhood. It was about survival. Selina became a speaker at small events, then larger ones. Her words carried weight, not because they were polished, but because they were lived. She never named Fiona or Darian, but everyone knew. And people respected her more for refusing to drag them publicly, choosing instead to rise above. And then came the night fate staged its final act. It was at a gala, a year after the wedding disaster. Selina had been invited as a guest speaker to share her journey. She walked into the grand hall, draped in a flowing emerald gown, her confidence radiant. As she stepped onto the stage, she noticed them, Fiona and Darian, seated near the back. Fiona's eyes widened, shock freezing her features. Darian's face was harder to read, guilt and longing warred in his expression. Selina didn't falter. She told her story, not with bitterness, but with grace. She spoke about betrayal, about losing everything, about finding strength in the ruins. The audience hung on every word. By the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause, a standing ovation echoing off the walls. Selina bowed her head slightly, her heart steady. She didn't need revenge. This was justice enough. As the crowd dispersed, Fiona approached her, eyes glistening. For the first time in a long while, she looked small. "Selina," she whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know, it wasn't worth it. None of it." Selina looked at her once friend, the woman who had stolen her wedding day, her trust, her peace. She saw the hollow beneath Fiona's eyes, the weight of choices that had corroded her soul. "I know," Selina said softly. "Because what's stolen never truly belongs to you." She walked away before Fiona could respond, her head high, her spirit unshackled. That night, as Selina looked out from her balcony at the city lights, she realized something profound. Betrayal hadn't destroyed her. It had refined her. She was not the girl who had stood trembling in a wedding gown. She was something stronger, sharper, unbreakable. And though the scars would always remain, they no longer defined her. Fiona and Darian had written the cruelest chapter of her life. But Selina had taken back the pen. The rest of the story was hers to tell. The end.